All right, ready for chapter 3. Deal. What are you saying? Beth asked Eddie as they sat in Beth's room after school, watching the rain stream down the second story window. Caroline, sitting on the floor playing jacks, thought her older sister was like a tiger the way Eddie paced back and forth upstairs from one room to another. The rain made Eddie crazy. I just don't trust those Hatfords, Eddie said. You know they're going to rig their race so that one of their bottles will get a head start. We shouldn't have agreed to this slave business. Oh, it might not be so bad, said Beth hopefully. If Josh got to be king, it might be fun. Besides, what if one of us wins? That's what we have to make happen, said Eddie. We've got to make sure one of our bottles goes the farthest by April 30th. Caroline's hand dropped and the little red ball rolled under Beth's bed. But that would be cheating, she said. So do you think that's going to stop them? Said Eddie. They would never have agreed to this if they didn't know they could rig it to win. Then I don't want to do it if it's not a fair race, said Beth. If they're going to cheat, I'll cheat, but not if they're not, said Caroline, not quite sure of what she just said. How are we going to know? Asked Beth. Eddie plopped down on the bed. Here's what we'll do. She outlined a plan, and 5 minutes later she called the Hatford boys to say that the girls were on their way over with a contract. In their yellow rain slickers, the three Malloy sisters pulled on their boots in the kitchen. Where are you off to? Asked Mrs. Malloy from the dining room, where income tax forms covered the table. We're just going over to the Hatfords to make some rules for a bottle race on the river, Eddie said. Well, don't get too near the water. The river's starting to go down, but it's still fairly high. We won't, said Caroline. The river and sky were gray, but there was a feathery fog of green on the trees, only wisps of leaves, the lightest of greens and yellows. The girls slogged down to the bridge, crossed over, and went up the sidewalk to the Hatfords' porch. Josh opened the door. Hi, come in, he said. They stopped to deposit their boots on the porch. Inside, the boys were waiting for them, and Peter offered the remains of his animal crackers. There's a whole bear in there somewhere, he said. Don't eat it, Josh warned. That box of crackers has been in Peter's closet for months, and you should see his closet. You want some popcorn? Wally offered, holding up a couple of microwave bags. That sounded more appealing. So the 7 of them sat around the kitchen table, listening to for the popping to stop. Now, said Jake. No, see, there's another pop, said Wally. Okay, now, said Caroline. Nope, 2, 3 more pops. Finally, the bag was removed and another inserted, and 5 minutes later, 2 metal bowls of popcorn were making the round around the kitchen table. Okay, here's the deal, said Eddie. Her real name was Edith Ann, but she said she'd fight anyone who called her that. If we're going to do the race, it's got to be fair. There are all kinds of ways we could cheat, and the others wouldn't know about it, so it's got to be cheat-proof. How are you going to do that? Asked Wally. Like you said, we have to get 7 bottles, all this same size, with tight caps, and we have to put them in the river at the same place at the same time. Caroline looked at the faces around her as Eddie explained the rules. There was a cheating smile on Jake Hatford's face if she ever knew one. And to make sure that nobody puts the same kind of a bottle with his name and address in it a day or so early, she continued, which made Jake suddenly snap to attention, the girls get to put something secret in each of the boys' bottles, and the boys get to do the same with the girls' bottles. This way, if someone calls us to say that they found one of our bottles, we'll ask what was in it, and it had better have that secret something, or we'll know it's an extra bottle somebody put in the river, and that won't count. The boys looked at each other. Okay, fair enough. I could find something secret to put in our bottles, Peter offered. Peter, anything you find in your closet will either be moldy or decayed. No thanks. Are we agreed on the time limit? Eddie went on. 4 weeks, said Jake. The deadline will be the last day of April. Whoever's bottle goes farthest by then gets to make the others do what he says. Or she says, said Beth. Yeah, but wait. What if someone finds one of the bottles but doesn't call? There's nothing we can do about that. It's just the chance we have to take, said Eddie. And if they call after April 30th, too bad. Deal? Deal. The girls walked all around the table giving high fives to the boys, the butter from the popcorn traveling hand to hand. Then they went to the front door to put on their boots and raincoats. Hey, look, the sun! It wasn't sun exactly, but the sky was brighter and the rain had stopped. For the first time in days, there was a little gold in the sky along with the gray. Maybe they'll hold tryouts tomorrow, Eddie mused. Goodbye, Eddie. Goodbye, Beth and Caroline, called Peter, holding one of the popcorn bowls in his arm. Goodbye, said Caroline. Get ready to be my humble, obedient slaves if my bottle goes the farthest. Ha! Shot back Jake. Be ready to work like dogs if my bottle goes the farthest. The girls crossed the road and went down the path to the swinging bridge, stopping to peer over the cable handrail at the water. Do you suppose it's over our heads now? Caroline asked. In places, I suppose. The guys said there are only certain parts of it that are even deep enough for swimming, said Beth. Still, I'll bet a bottle would travel pretty fast in this. I wonder what it's like to be in a flood, said Caroline. Just think if water was slowly creeping up your stairs and you had to crawl out a window onto the roof and wave a pillowcase at passerbys, pleading for help, and a helicopter came along and a handsome man dropped a rope ladder and he crawled down and picked you up in his arms and climbed back up the ladder and... Okay, Caroline, we get the picture, said Eddie. Everything to you is just a movie. If you were in a real tragedy, it wouldn't seem so romantic. I can do tragic, said Caroline. What if a woman crawled out on the roof with her little baby in her arms, but the water kept rising and rushing and swept the baby away? And... Stop it, said Beth. Caroline, can't you just talk normal for a change? The girls went on across the bridge and up the soggy hill to their house. I don't want to leave here, said Caroline. We've had more fun in Buckman than we've ever had back in Ohio. Well, I don't think we're going to have any say in it, whatever Dad decides, Eddie told her. In the kitchen, they took off their wet clothes. Sun's trying to come out, called their mother. The forecast says it's supposed to clear up for a while. That was good news, for Eddie anyway. Mom, has Dad said anything more about going back to Ohio? Do you think we will? My dear, you know as much about it as I do, Mrs. Moy said. He's waiting to hear from someone who's waiting to hear from someone else who's waiting to hear. It's like dominoes. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't find out till the very last minute. With your father, anything could happen. Chapter 4. Tryouts. Mrs. Hatford brought home the 7 bottles as requested, but on Tuesday the rain had stopped, so the big bottle race was put on hold till the team had been chosen. After school, Jake Hatford and Eddie Malloy were both out on the school baseball diamond with the other hopefuls. They had all been practicing for an hour under the watchful eye of their coach, and finally he called everyone over. They were all boys, except Eddie. With only 9 players on a team, Mr. Malloy said, I have to make a choice and choose the 9 of you for the A team that I think will play the best. The rest of you will be the B team, and you'll each be a substitute for an A player. Things happen in a game, you know. If a player gets sick or hurt, a substitute has to be ready to take over, so you'll come to every practice too. Some of you may even prove to be better players than my A team, and I'll keep watching during practice. If I need to change you around, I will, so everyone needs to play his very best. All the boys, of course, were looking sideways at Eddie. So were all of Jake's brothers and Eddie's 2 sisters, who sat on the wooden bleachers behind home plate. The coach went down the line and chose the 9 players for the A team. Both Eddie and Jake made the list, to the cheers of those in the bleachers. Then Mr. Bailey asked each of the 9 what position he would most like to play. Pitcher, said Jake. Pitcher, said Eddie. Some of the boys smiled and elbowed each other. Baseball was big in Buckman, and half the kids in the school, the boys anyway, wanted to be one of the Buckman Badgers when they reached 6th grade. 4 on the A team wanted to be the pitcher, and Mr. Bailey tried them out one by one till only Jake and Eddie were left. Who wants to go first? Asked Mr. Bailey. Jake and Eddie both said, I will, at the same time. Okay, Jake, you pick up a bat there, and Edith Ann, you... Eddie, she corrected firmly. Okay, Eddie, you go out to the mound. The coach tossed her a ball, and Eddie took her place. The Hatford brothers and the Malloy sisters were all rooting for both Jake and Eddie for a change, because they wouldn't be competing against each other. They'd be playing teams for the school from other schools. Okay, let's see what you can do, the coach said. Eddie juggled the ball around in her hands a couple of times. The other boys, whom Mr. Bailey had sent out in the field to catch, laughed softly among themselves. Jake chose a bat, and after a few practice swings, went to home plate. Mr. Bailey served as catcher. Ready? The coach called out. Eddie drew back her arm, her body turning a little to one side. She slowly lifted one foot off the ground, and then pow! The ball came so fast that Jake wasn't ready. He blinked as the boys in the outfield fell silent. Mr. Bailey caught the ball and sent it back to Eddie. Good throw, he said. Let's see another one. This time, Jake was ready. With his knees slightly bent, weight on the balls of his feet, he gripped the bat, his eyes on Eddie. He saw her arm move back, saw her body turn, saw her foot come off the ground, and then the pitch. Crack! The ball went sailing out over left field and was caught by one of Jake's friends. Good pitch, good swing, Jake. Now you two trade places. There were murmurs in the outfield again, and the boys automatically moved in a little closer to catch any ball Eddie might hit. Jake did his windup with a flourish and let the ball fly. Crack! The ball sailed out over Jake's head, far out into center field, and rolled along the ground several yards before a fielder could rush back to scoop it up. Again, the coach said. Wally could tell from the way Jake was winding up this time that he was trying to scare Eddie. Whish came the ball, but Eddie was faster. She didn't even blink. Crack! The ball sailed out over right field. Get it, the boys were yelling. But Eddie could have made a home run in the time it took them to get that ball back to Mr. Bailey. Okay, Eddie, you're in. So are you, Jake. I'm going to have you two trade off as pitchers. Over on the bleachers, the Hatfords and Malloys cheering section hooted and hollered. When both the A and B teams finished practice an hour later, the Hatfords and Malloys walked back together. It seemed to Wally that Beth and Caroline just wouldn't hush about how well Eddie had performed. They didn't say anything about Jake. You did it! You made the team! Caroline cried. Boy, you showed them, said Beth. Mr. Bailey's teeth almost fell out when he saw you hit that first ball. You're in, Eddie, you're in. You'll wow 'em. I told them I could do it, Eddie crowed. I wish the games began this month. I wish we didn't have to wait till May. Everybody needs practice, Jake mumbled, even you. When they had parted at last at the swinging bridge and the Malloy girls had gone home, Jake said to the others, She'll be impossible, you know. She already is, said Wally. Who? The Whomper, of course. That was the nickname they had given Eddie. It'll go to her head. You can tell already. Did you hear how many times she kept saying, I told everyone I could pitch. I told everyone I could bat. So okay already. Do we have to go on hearing that the rest of the season? Wally didn't say so, but Jake sounded a little jealous. Just be glad she's on your team and not playing for some other school, Josh said. Yeah, but Jake didn't look happy. At dinner that evening, when Jake announced he had made the team, Mrs. Hatford said, That's great, Jake. Didn't you try out Josh? People often thought that Jake and Josh, being twins, liked the same things. Even their parents made that same mistake sometimes. No, said Josh. He was sort of the resident artist for the school. He could draw better than anyone in Buckman Elementary, including the teachers. I'll just watch from the bleachers. The parents are going to take turns driving you kids to the Saturday games next month. Your mother and I will each take a Saturday off if we need to, and I'm sure the Malloys will do their share of driving. Of course. They wouldn't want to miss seeing their precious Edith Ann pulverize the other team, would they? Jake jabbed his potato and stuffed a bite in his mouth. Do you mind having Eddie on your team, he asked. Heck no, Jake insisted. As long as she doesn't throw her weight around when she's with us, I'm okay with it. But next to throwing a baseball, throwing her weight around seemed to be what Eddie did best. When they all walked to school together the next day, she made a point of telling them that she was wearing her backpack on her left shoulder only because it was important not to put on any stress on her pitching arm. When they stood on the playground waiting for the bell, she did finger exercises because she said it was important to keep her fingers flexible. When she had to write an essay on the topic of her choice for 6th grade English, Eddie chose The History of Baseball. Jake told Wally at recess. She needs to be taken down a peg, he said. Uh-oh, thought Wally. Whenever Jake talked like that, it meant trouble. As all 7 of them walked home together that afternoon talking baseball, Wally said to change the subject, We'd better do that bottle race today. The water's already going down. It was true that although they still couldn't see the rocks, they lay in clumps in the riverbed. The river wasn't as high as it had been only a few days before. All right, said Eddie. We'll go home and find something secret to go in your bottles. Then we'll be over. Why don't we follow the river back as far as we can before we throw the bottles in, Jake suggested. Then we can watch them pass by our house, go down around the bend, and float back up the other side of Island Avenue. Unless they get stuck upriver somewhere. The river twists and turns a lot before it gets to our house. We decided to paint the caps of our bottles red. That way we can tell them from yours, Eddie, and see which ones are ahead, just for fun. Wally saw Eddie's eyes narrow. Are you sure that's the only reason? She asked. Of course, said Jake. What other reason could there be? Ha, said Beth. Double ha, said Caroline. Chapter 5 is Into the Drink